So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. Go ahead and get started. So here's our agenda tonight. I just wanted to share our new class for 2026, 2027. So this will be our new FIT fellows. This will include those that are returning with us, and then just again, our FIT scholars. And then we'll turn it over to our guest speaker, Dr. Ken Slaw, and he is our Executive Director of SVS. So this is our new FIT Fellow class for 2026, 2027. We're super excited to have everybody here. It's going to be 23 new FIT Fellows joining us, and we have med students and nurses again this year. So I'm excited to have them join us. So this is our new list. We're going to welcome them at VQI at VAM. And also our FIT scholars for this year. And again, congratulations to them. We have Gabrielle Grayson, Brandon Gaston, Camilla, Dominic Fasaponte, and Ryan Wahidi. So congratulations. Just as a reminder, we will not have a meeting in June because of VQI at VAM, but we will resume our monthly meetings July 21st. So I will start that new invite series probably after VQI at VAM. So just look for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ken Slaw. And thank you so much for taking the time out to spend this evening with us tonight, Ken. So I'm just going to stop sharing and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Let me see if I can get squared away here. Okay, everybody see the slides okay?
Yes.
All right. I know that there is a group of the FIT program that will actually be attending the full LDP this year. So thank you to Jim and to the staff and to the leadership of the FIT program for supporting leadership and the leadership development program. We're excited to have you. And what I'm going to present this evening will just touch a little bit of what you're going to hear at the VAM, but I promise you all the excitement will still be exciting for you when you come to the full program at the VAM. What I was hoping to do this evening, or what I was asked to do this evening, is just give everybody a little bit of a background orientation about why this topic is so important, why it is really a separate discipline and a separate skill set that every vascular surgeon, I think, really needs to embrace in order to make the change that you're all trying to make on behalf of patients and in terms of vascular healthcare delivery. Vascular surgeons often discover through the course of their careers that the rest of the world and organizations don't always function like the OR. And it can be a little bit frustrating with you trying to manage all of your energy toward trying to keep all variables under your control at the same time. And then you flip and now you're working in organizations trying to make change where it's impossible to control all the variables at all times. And you discover the frustration of its very different skill sets and very different disciplines in terms of being clinically successful and being successful in terms of your leadership. One skill set is very left-brained, algorithmic, and very task and expert skill oriented. The other is very relational in terms of the muscles and the strength that you need to build. And so we'll try this evening just to give you an overview and a flavor of why that is the way it is, and have some time for some questions, and maybe we can talk about some of your actual sort of day-to-day challenges and how to apply some of this material. You guys all know my background, so no need to stop here. I'll send you the slides as well in case you have any interest. I have nothing to disclose in terms of conflicts of interest. So this evening, what I wanted to do is just identify the dynamics of the situation that all of us find ourselves in, but you find yourselves in terms of where your careers are at, in terms of having to lead from the middle of a larger organization, and sort of the special dynamics of leading from the front, middle, and behind in complex organizations, and leading up, down, and across in organizations. So we'll touch on that. Identify the factors that really strengthen leadership and leading from the middle of complex organizations, and identify some tools and exercises that you can take back to practice and strengthen your own experiential learning. So I just want to start philosophically with all of you. Again, I know every day you're focused on micro details and things that you need to do for your patients. This topic requires you to take a step back and sort of think about the world differently, more philosophically, more relationally in terms of what's going on around you, rather than what you're focused on at any particular given moment. So the bottom line is, no matter where you are in an organization, whether you're in the middle, whether you're in administration, whether you're at the very top of the organization, even at the C-suite level in organizations, you're always in the middle of something larger. Always. There's always something larger than you going on. And it's a really important philosophical concept for you to understand that no matter where you are and no matter how high you climb in organizational hierarchy and structure, this will never change. You'll still be in a fishbowl. Getting things done still is going to require other people. It's still going to be relational. And while you might be able to make all of your gains just on the virtue of your winning personality, more likely than not, it's going to require some skill development in terms of how organizations function and work and what makes people tick in order to be successful as you work through organizations. So you're always in the middle of something larger. Now, a lot of people feel like your aspirational goals in your career should be to get to the top, climb to the top, climb to the mountain, climb to the top. I just want to let you know that, the top isn't always a very exciting place if what you care about is making real, sustained, dynamic change in organizations. The middle is an exciting place when it comes to actually making a difference and making a change in organizations. And so I just want to posit for you that right now, where you are in your careers might be the most dynamic, exciting, filled with learning moments that you're having in terms of making real sustained change. As you get promoted, as you move up the chain, as you get into more positions of power, your ability to make change actually is diminished. Your ability to make decisions is increased. Your influence over decisions is increased, but your ability to actually make things happen and do things on the ground actually are diminished. And you find as you go up in organizations, you're more and more dependent on everybody else around you to move the ball and to make things happen. So to me, the middle is an exciting place. It's where change really, it's the crucible of change. It's where change becomes catalyzed in organizations. And it's not without its challenges. And so the middle is also a very challenging place. It requires a lot of awareness, strategy, diplomacy, patience, and you're constantly going from meeting to meeting and room to room with a lot of elephants in the room, right? That you need to navigate in terms of how to make change and how to make sustained change in the organization. So it's exciting, but it's challenging. And that's what really makes it the great opportunity to grow. Nothing in organization moves in isolation. Everything that you do as a leader requires followers and followership. It requires a team. Moving an organization, changing a health system, even something as simple as changing a form requires a lot of people to have hands-on, to touch an administrative process in order to get it through all of the different checks and balances that it needs to go through. So we tend to think that what matters is having outstanding leadership at the senior level in organizations, but anybody at the top that really knows anything about leadership tells you it's the leadership at the top that doesn't amount to much if you don't have exceptional leader at the unit level in the middle. And so this is to say that all of you, your leaders that are looking to you to get things done and make change, they cannot get anything done without you. And so just know that they appreciate you, even though they don't always show it as much as they should. So a couple of myths about what it's like to lead from the middle, right? This is from Star Wars. There's always a bigger fish, right, in organizations. So a couple of myths. Unless I'm at the top, I can't lead. I don't need to worry about leadership until I finally make it into a position of power at the top of the organization. What we know about leadership is that leadership is behavioral. Leadership is a set of skills that you learn that you can sculpt and fashion right where you are at this moment in time. And what I would say is leadership behavior occurs everywhere all the time. Another myth, I don't need to learn leadership until I get to the top. The truth is, the more you learn now about leadership, about motivating people, about change, science, and effective change management, the more it actually will propel you to the top because it's your outcomes and the way you achieve your outcomes that will ultimately probably say the most about your promotability and your climb to the top to get into positions of higher power. Another myth is that when you get to the top, I'll be able to be in complete control and I'll be able to do whatever I want and make the changes that I want to make. And as I said before, that's really not true. What you find out is that you accumulate more and more power and you go up with organizational responsibility. You have more volume, you have more to control with greater consequences. So the more you control, the more you realize you're actually dependent on those around you to get results because you have less time for the doing. And most of the time, what you're doing at a leadership level is doing the blocking and tackling for everybody else to try to get barriers out of the way so that they can do what they do best. And just understand that the fishbowl never goes away. You may think you're in a fishbowl working in the middle of an organization, and that when you get to the top or get to a higher position, the fishbowl goes away. It doesn't. It's just a bigger fishbowl. And you're still being observed and you're still being looked at. You're always in the middle of something and there's always a fishbowl around you. And then unless I reach the top, I'm never going to really fulfill my potential. And as mentioned earlier, great breakthroughs in organizations rarely, if ever, happen at the top of the organization. The people at the top of the organizations are usually too stressed and too anxious and too focused on trying to move the politics of the organization to have the time and the mental space to really come up with breakthrough ideas. Breakthrough ideas happen at the middle where everybody interacts with each other in organizations. So if you look at every major breakthrough and great idea that percolates through organizations, very few come from the top and are driven down. Most of them come organically from the organization and are enabled by the top in order to really fulfill the fullness of what those ideas can become. So my message to you in the FIT program is, do you have a choice whether you wish to lead your organizations. And I say no. When you made the decision to be a physician, when you made the decision to be accountable for people's lives and limbs, you signed up to lead. You signed up for the duty of leadership. You chose the profession. You chose this responsibility for your patients. But you do have a choice of whether you're going to learn how to lead well. And I would just really emphasize for you, just wishing it so is not going to make it so. Just saying that I got promoted, I'm now a department chair, I'm now a division chief, therefore I am now a leader, is really not true. Leadership is its own discipline, its own science, and you have to learn it just like you learned your clinical skills. And if you learn it to mastery, then you'll really be in a position to combine both of your skill sets to make incredible, meaningful change. There's a wonderful article that was written in Harvard Business Review recently that really demonstrated that physician-led, physician-run hospitals and health systems clearly get far better outcomes for less cost than the MBAs and the business folks that are leading most hospitals in this country. So as a physician, if you learn to master the skill sets of leadership, you are much more likely to achieve your goals for patients as well as your health system that you're working on behalf. So I don't want to go too deeply into this tonight, but when we talk about leadership being relational and we talk about leadership being different than some of what you were taught in medical school, this is really what we're talking about. Everything that you were taught in medical school was to go macro to micro. It was about the details. It was about the variables. It was about the algorithms. It was about the knowledge. In many ways, your medical school education drummed out of you a lot of the awareness, perception, and skill sets that are actually needed to excel in leadership. And so I just like to remind everybody that when you work in the field of leadership, you're working in the field of human energy. And you have to have a bigger field of view than when you're working in the OR or when you're working on research or clinical matters. And so from a physics of leadership standpoint, leaders need to adopt a large field worldview of what's going on around them. Not just the micro level of what's going on, but what's in the next ring and the next ring and the next ring, and to build that awareness of the web of interaction that's flowing around everything that you're doing. As I mentioned before, the other thing is that leaders are really sculptors. We can only manifest in reality what we want to create through synergy with others. We can have a great vision. We can have a piece of art in our mind. We can have an idea, and we're sculptors. But we need everybody else around us to actually bring those visions into reality. And so to master leadership, you have to also become at least a part-time psychologist. You have to understand people. You have to understand what motivates people at both a psychological and a social level. And sort of the key there is when you're interacting with your colleagues and you're interacting with others, if you lead with making sure that you're reaching them on common purpose, you're giving them the opportunity to not only achieve, but grow in the process of achieving, and you're giving them those opportunities, and you're giving them projects that they can take off on their own, That's the way to motivate professionals. It's not money, it's not tangible things. It's about purpose, growing toward mastery of your craft, and achieving autonomy and having something that you can build on your own, a project that's very motivating for most of your colleagues and most of your teams and the people like you. So if you key in on those critical things, you're going a long way toward making sure the energy that you're creating in leadership is productive in the organization. And then the other thing about the physics of leadership that is, I think, really true and interesting, especially in this day and age, is that everything you build, once you finally get it to perfection, you need to let it go. Because once you have everything right where you want it, everything is changing so rapidly around you that it's almost obsolete as soon as it's created. And so you have to become comfortable with recreation, redevelopment, adaptation, and evolution in everything that you build. AI is a good example of that in terms of what we're going through right now. I won't go through all of this. I just want you to take a read. This is my proof of concept for you. I've taken all of the laws of physics that you learned in high school and college, and I just want to show you that just like the planets and everything else that exists in the universe that's made of star stuff, so are we. So are our bodies. So are all of the cells in our bodies made of the same star stuff. And if you really think about human behavior in organizations, we act just like the other systems that are out there in the world and in the universe that are functioning by these laws of physics, just to name a few. When you think about your organization, you don't think there's gravity, just like out in space. Gravity is holding all the planets in alignment. Smaller moons orbit around larger planets. You don't think that's happening in your organizations, except instead of gravity, what we call gravity in organizations is influence. And influence is defined by your positional power, your credibility, and the skills you develop in leadership, your ability to generate outcomes. And so you can actually grow your gravitational pull on everybody else in the organization by working on growing your leadership skills. The other laws of motion, think about organizations you're in. Why is it so hard to make change? Because people prefer to stand still and preserve the status quo until you exert enough force to put them into motion. That's why change is so difficult. And the force required to put people into motion depends on the size of the organization, the size of the change or the amplitude of the change, and the speed of impact that you're willing to enter into to make change happen in an organization. So this is just a fun way to really try to convince you that the work of leadership and the work of human development and the way people function in organizations is really about energy. It's really about energy fields and reaching them at this level. You've heard of Einstein's theory of relativity, and we all know in organizations, your reality is in the eye of the beholder. You can go into a meeting, you can say the same thing to 10 people, and 10 people will walk away with a different interpretation because reality is in the eye of the beholder. And then, probably most important, are organizational forces of energy. In organizations, energy takes the form of ideas. And as a leader, you need to think about the consequences of saying yes and saying no to that energy and to those ideas. Newton discovered in his law of conservation that all energy and mass in the universe is conserved. It changes form, but it is never destroyed. So you tell me, the last time you said no to an idea, did the idea go away? Probably not. If you said no, that idea probably found an outlet somewhere else. So the law of conservation of energy or ideas tells us that you can decide to say no, but you need to understand the consequences are that you cannot kill that energy. You cannot kill that idea with a no. It just means it's going to go somewhere else. And you need to think about the consequences and scenario planning. And you probably can think of lots of different examples of this. So these are just ways to kind of let you know there is something larger than yourselves at work when you're working in the field of leadership. There's a lot of books that have been written about leadership. There's a lot of archetypes and sort of common themes, what people talk about when they write books about leadership. And we've covered a couple of these. Leadership is often been characterized as about influence. It's about your gravitational pull, right? It's about your influence. And we talked about the importance of credibility. It's about vision. It's about not only having a vision, but being able to paint a picture of it so that everyone else is excited to follow you in that vision. It's about service to something larger than yourself. That's often referred to as servant leadership. Robert Greenleaf wrote the book on servant leadership. That's the kind of leader I am. I'm all about service to members, service to patients. That's what really is at the core center of what drives me and my energy. It's about character and credibility. If you remember one thing tonight, remember this quote from Norman Schwarzkopf. It's really important. Leadership is a combination of character and strategy. If you have to give one up, give up strategy. Your integrity, your credibility, your honesty, your values are the only thing worth dying over in organizations. Once they're lost, they're virtually impossible to get back. So make sure that you're modeling the way and that you're living your values and that you're always building your credibility. That's your currency. That's the core. That would be the nucleus of what sort of creates your core of leadership. And then, of course, leaders understand that you can never know everything there is to know about human existence, leadership, or people. And so your learning never ends. Your own development, your own human development, your own awareness and understanding of how to excel in leadership will be a journey that follows you for the rest of your life if you embrace it. You'll never know enough. And every scenario that you have to lead is really another learning situation, another crucible for learning. It's often said that leadership is situational, not positional. And I think that's really true. I think people ask all the time, what's more important, leadership or management? And the answer is both. You need to be strong in leadership. You need to be strong in management, but you need to know when to lead and when to manage. And most organizational dysfunction occurs because people are managing when they should be leading or leading when they should be managing, right? And so thinking through when you need to move people and motivate people, that's a leadership function. You can't manage them there. You've got to lead them there. But when you're talking about how to place the ladder and climb it best and get an outcome and get a project across a finish line, you need to show the finish line, but you need management in order to execute, right? And get it across the finish line. So it's really a false battle between leadership and management. They're symbiotic. And so that's why we say leadership is situational. What's critical is to know when to lead and when to manage. If you need to move people, lead. If you need to move process, manage. So leadership is behavioral, therefore learnable, and therefore it's a choice. We learn leadership through observation of others. If I ask you right now, have you experienced a leader in your life that you promised yourself you would never emulate, ever, because of the experience you had with that individual? You probably can think of somebody who wasn't a really very good leader. And so that's how we learn. Half of our leadership learning is, what did we like that other people did? And what did we not like that we've experienced that other people did? And we learn through observations of others what resonates with us in terms of the type of leader I am and I want to be, and the type of leader that I've experienced. Leadership is a ride your bike activity. You've got to do it in order to learn. Dr. Schutz made the comment first thing before we got started. He's ridden a lot of bikes in leadership. He's fallen off and skinned his knees a few times, right? That's the way you learn in leadership. So it's observation of values and others. It's trial and error with mentor feedback. And then, 10% is what's going to sink in tonight when you attend lectures or read books about leadership, right? It gives you the foundation and the basis, but leadership is what you have to learn on the job. But you need to be open to the learning. And you've all experienced probably a lot of leaders, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And what you want to do in building your credibility in leadership is to make sure that you do both. You need to talk the talk, you need to lead from your values, and you need to be really careful about making sure you live them every single day, because that's what builds your credibility in leadership. Now, in the SVS Leadership Development Program, we build our leadership model from a research evidence-based model that was developed by Kouzes and Posner. You probably have heard from Tiffany Belomo, and you heard a little bit about this model. The reason why we like this model is because it's the only leadership model that is going on 40 years of consistent data collection. Nick, it's like the registry. We've got 40 years of continuous leadership data. It's not the same level of detail. It's leadership, it's social science research, but year over year, we now have 4 million ratings of leaders. And what are the behaviors that they do that drive success for all of those leaders? And so through 40 years of research, the specific behaviors that have been highlighted or articulated, if you do these things consistently every single day, you're more likely to be perceived as successful in leadership by those around you. Are being honest, that's your value set, that's your credibility. Being forward-looking, having vision, being competent, able to not only lead, but manage the team to the goal line and get outcomes, be inspiring, reach them motivationally, and of course, your overall intelligence, which I would say is not just IQ, but also relational intelligence in order to get the job done. And so Kouzes and Posner wrote a book, and this is the model that we teach in the leadership development program. And out of those 4 million ratings, after doing factor analysis, they bucket all of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of behaviors that define leadership into 5 critical buckets: modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, challenging the process, enabling others to act, and encouraging the heart. And there's an instrument that is used in Kouzes and Posner's research called the Leadership Practice Inventory that everybody in the SVS LDP takes this inventory. And then I try to help coach everybody through the results. And this is an example. And there's basically 30 behaviors that have been factor analyzed out of the hundreds of behaviors that define leadership. These 30 behaviors make up these 5 buckets. And what we really do in the leadership program is try to teach these 30 practices and try to help people build the skills around these practices. If you don't want to read the entire book about the research, there is a shorter 90-page Reader's Digest version of an analysis of the culmination of Kouzes and Posner's research called The Truth About Leadership. That's the one I recommend. You can get through it on an airplane and you can get the big picture. But basically, they make the point that what they've learned after all of this research is that every single individual that chooses to lead, regardless of where they lead in an organization, can make a huge difference in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. Credibility is the foundation of leadership. Your personal values is really what should be driving your commitment in order to be successful. You have to build trust in teams and in organizations in order to succeed. You either lead by example or you don't lead at all. Focus on the future is really what sets leaders and managers apart from each other. Understanding you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish alone. Challenge and making change is the crucible for greatness in leadership. The best leaders are the best learners, and leadership at the end of the day is an affair of the heart, because in order to be successful, you have to move people, and you can't move people unless you can reach people at the heart level. So that's kind of the fundamental building blocks that we teach around leadership. And let me just finish up this presentation with some unique attributes of actually leading from the middle. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the interesting attributes is that when you're leading from the middle, you're having to lead simultaneously up, down, and across the organization at any given moment. You're surrounded by people in the middle, so don't fight it. You don't have to like everybody. You don't have to love it, but you can't fight it. You have to embrace it, and you have to leverage the talent and skill and energy around you. You have to channel it for productive purposes in the organization. It requires patience, testing, and it can be a little bit frustrating because things don't always go as fast as you want them to when you're in the middle of an organization. But you need to trust that results, outcomes, and good leadership will be noticed. Great ideas, if you're persistent in continuing to make the case, eventually get noticed. It's one of those universal laws of energy. The right ideas will find their right outlet if you are persistent and you believe in them. And so don't give up on great ideas. Just find another way. Find another way to present it. Find a different audience that might be necessary, that might be blocking you. If you've got the right idea and the right solution, it will find its outlet in an organization. And being caught in the middle can be tense, but it can also be a safe harbor because you get to create and pilot test a lot of things in the middle, but you don't ultimately have all of the accountability for the results. That goes to the top of the organization that gave you permission to do the pilot in the first place. And so the middle is sort of a cool place where you get to experiment and pilot a lot of things. Thinking back of Kouzes and Posner, these are the critical skill sets then in order to really maneuver through managing up, down, and across. Modeling the way is about building your credibility and your integrity. Don't say one thing and do another. If you say something that you believe in, make sure your behavior follows it. Make sure your communication follows it. Be willing to go first and be willing to back your first followers 1,000%. And it's about really being resilient. Even though people may question your values or bring you all kinds of challenges, stay true to yourself. Stay true to your values. That's the way you build credibility and integrity and leadership. Understand inspiring a shared vision. We talked about paint a big picture, but what's really important is paint it so that someone else can see themselves in that picture. And you go a long way toward getting people to board your ship in whatever journey you're taking. Challenge the process, embrace your role. I always like to talk folks that are working in the middle of organization. I like to title them catalysts in chief. You are the catalysts. You are the people that are making everything churn and happen in an organization. Embrace that role as catalyst in chief. Plan to fail and learn in order to succeed. And there's lots of tools to be able to do that. Enable others to act. Most great leaders know the more you build leadership around you and delegate responsibility and accountability to others that you trust, the higher you go. Rising tide raises all boats. So delegate and trust with autonomy and accountability in terms of moving teams and moving things forward. And then encourage the heart of everybody else around you. Listen carefully and sculpt autonomy, mastery, and purpose into your relationships and into your opportunities, and everything will start to move in a much more productive path. It's really the essence of what drives professional motivation. You might remember from your chemistry, catalysts have very special properties in chemistry. When you introduce a catalyst in a chemical reaction, it's a specific agent whose presence is required to activate a particular reaction. In many ways, that's what you all are. Something isn't working until you enter into the situation, use your leverage, use your ideas, use your talent. You're often the catalysts that are needed to complete a circuit in order for something to happen. Don't just make things happen. Make things happen that wouldn't happen without you, right? That you're bringing a special talent and a special perspective. And reduce barriers that under normal circumstances can prevent a reaction from happening. And so leading from the middle, really means embracing these qualities of being a catalyst in chief. In terms of middle up leadership, just a couple of tips of advice. Time with your leaders is really valuable. You may not agree with them. You may be opposed to some of the things that they want to do, but they're your leaders and your time with them is still valuable. Use it to optimize progress, not process and psychodrama. Chances are, even if you don't agree on everything, you agree on some things. So focus on the some things that you agree on and not the things that, you don't agree on. Or if you have a good enough relationship with the leaders that you work with, explore why they believe what they do so that you have a better understanding of why you're not seeing it from the same perspective, even though you honor and respect the perspective that they have. Demonstrate how you are aligning your time, energy, and resources to achieve the outcomes and strategies they're trying to achieve. Where a lot of disagreement occurs in organizations usually isn't at the high level strategy level. It's usually at the execution how-to level. And so I always try to give advice to folks that when you're leading up the organization, start with those large macro goals that everybody agrees on and you're all on the same page, and then work toward where there might be some different disagreements about going left or right, but we still are trying to get to the same place together, right? So it's always best to start from that larger field where you have agreement than to start with what's blocking you in terms of where you're trying to go. And whether you believe they're effective or not, support your leadership. If you honor and respect the position, that builds your own credibility and trust. And it also articulates your values in terms of what you expect when you get into the position of leadership. You're going to have people that don't agree with you, but it's important that they respect and honor your experience and the position and talent that you're bringing. Take on the tough jobs and do the heavy lifting. And I don't need to convince you of this as vascular surgeons. This is what you do every single day. You're the first people to volunteer and take on the tough jobs. The goal is to add value to the organization and make your difference. So align yourself with the goals of the leader. Even if you disagree with the leader's approach, align yourself with the goals and help make it happen for the leader. And your pathway will be much smoother than abrasive and trying to be abrasive each step of the way. In terms of your colleagues and working middle across, it's really about alignment of vision and purpose. What you need is to be a member of a team for somebody else and to be a leader of your own team that requires everybody else. And so be a good team member and be a good team leader. So alignment of vision and purpose with everybody else around you is critical. Stimulate and support everybody's great ideas. Be that catalyst in chief. So what if it's not your idea? If it's somebody else's idea and it's a great idea, be a part of it. Jump on it. Add your energy. Be the catalyst that is required to make it happen in the organization. Over communicate. So much organizational dysfunction occurs because you sent a message and you just assume everybody got it exactly the way you intended it to be received. And what research shows us over and over again is that's rarely the case. So you need to communicate 5, 6 different times, different ways to make sure that the message that you intend to be received is actually received by the audience that needs to receive it. Over communicate and make sure people get it the way that you intended the message to be gotten. Be visible in organizations. If people don't see you much or they don't see you visibly leading, they don't equate you as someone to reach out to for support and to help. So you need to be visible, build meaningful, enduring relationships. You don't have to like everybody. You don't have to love everybody, but you do have to build positive, meaningful, professional relationships with everybody to move forward. And that's what you want to build in terms of your credibility and character in leadership. Foster professional and personal growth opportunities for yourself and everybody else around you, and foster completion, not competition. Work together to get things across the finish line. I'll help you with yours. You help me with mine. Let's not compete for resources, and then we both fail. Better to collaborate and rather than to compete. And in terms of middle down, in terms of the people that support you, again, alignment and communication and vision are really critical. Be explicit about what everyone else can do to help. You'll be amazed if you really start thinking about this, that maybe the most important person to remove a barrier for a problem that you have might not be at the top or the middle of the organization at all. It might be someone who's just going about their administrative work every single day that has the solution. So it's important to have those relationships with everybody, talk with everybody, see what they think, bring different perspectives at different levels around the challenges that you have. And you'll be amazed at how many times the answer to a really pervasive issue, or at least the next step towards solving it, comes from places you weren't expecting it to come from in your organization. Very important when you're leading down in an organization to recognize accomplishments, recognize talent, make sure it's made visible, and look for every professional and personal growth opportunity. So I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you. So key takeaways. In summary, we're all in the middle of larger organizations and systems. So stop trying to think of everything micro and what's in your own sort of sphere. Start thinking about everything at more of a macro level in terms of how is what I'm doing impacting larger fields around me? And where are those fields that I need to leverage in order to help generate momentum and energy for what I'm trying to accomplish? Heightened awareness of what needs to be led up, across, and down is critical to success. Understand you're doing all three simultaneously all the time. What's important is that your values are consistent. Your leadership values, your credibility is consistent. You're not changing. You're just adapting your approach up, across, or down to the audiences that you're leading. Try on the role of catalyst in chief and try to be that driver of change in your organization and champion of change. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are far more powerful motivators than tangible rewards. And make a personal commitment to keep reading, keep learning, take these assessments, get coaching, be mentored, and continue to develop these leadership skills, because ultimately it will lead to greater success. I just created a slide where we, at the end of each LDP program, we ask, what's the most important thing you might want to tell a future colleague that will be going through the program? So here's what graduates of the LDP are passing on to you. Stay curious and open to learning. It's a journey. Quality mentorship is absolutely essential in leadership development. Vision and strategy are key skill sets to build. Importance of understanding self can't be overestimated. Leading change is the most visible measure of success. Optimizing teams is the core of making progress. Seek feedback. It is invaluable. And master the art of communication. So wisdom from your colleagues to you. Okay, sorry, that was a lot of information thrown at you. And let me see, we have 4 minutes, Betsy, for questions, but I'm happy to stay on if anybody wants to chat a little bit after the session. But let me know what your thoughts are. Did this resonate with you? Is it helpful? Does it make sense? Do you have any questions that we might be able to address this evening, or any issues you might want to bring up that I can get back to you on in terms of some additional learning? Yeah, Nick.
Dr. Slaw, thank you so much. Phenomenal talk, and it's always a privilege to to listen to your talks. I remember that from the LDP course. One thing that captured my attention is you said when you create something, you have to learn how to let it go. Can you give us an example of that, or do you mean that create an infrastructure, create a system, and then that should be able to function autonomously, or how do you? Um,
Let me reframe it a little bit. when you build something, design it for adaptation is really the key here. The point is that whatever you build today, the environment around you is changing so rapidly that as the environment and the world changes and advances, it's going to deteriorate the foundation of what you built. Okay, new knowledge, new tools, new technologies. So my advice to you is to try to build things with those future trends and those future forces in mind, and build adaptability into the design so that it can last a long time. You know, it's sort of like if you build something beautiful, a sculpture of concrete, you know, the wind and the rain over years is going to diminish it. It's going to eat away at it, right? But if you design it or place it in a place where it won't be subject to those forces, it will last a lot longer, right? So the point is to build adaptation and to anticipate what is going to work toward diminishing what you've built, and build design to ensure that it can withstand those forces. Of course, in medicine and in everything that you do, there's very little anymore that really are going to be the same 20 or 30 years from now, right? Knowledge is happening so fast, innovation is happening so fast. You're all having to learn to be incredibly adaptive, you know, with what you're building. So I would say even in the teams and in the organizational structures and in the research projects you're designing, build them with an eye toward what it's going to need to adapt to going forward in the future to sustain for the long haul.
Thank you.
And any other sort of burning questions or thoughts that you have?
Yeah, hey,
Dr.
Ken.
Siemens? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I do have one, and I don't know, maybe this is too much in the weeds, but what advice would you give, and how would you give that advice to a peer who's a very committed leader, but at times devolves into too much management, perhaps even micromanaging, to the point that it really is hurting an organization?
Yeah, I think that's an important discussion to have. Now, obviously, it depends on your relationship and how well you know this person. And I guess what I would say, Bill, is what do you know about how they learn best? Because if they're somebody who will read an article, or who, you know, if they're very evidence-based about things and you show them some research on sort of, you get further by letting people go than
Mm-hmm.
by micromanaging. I think the point is to get somebody in a position where they're at least willing and ready to have a dialogue and discussion. Very few people have like an aha moment where, you know, something that they believed in for a long time just changes overnight. But it happens through dialogue and exchange of ideas and perspective that eventually you can find a common ground. And sometimes it's a baby step, right? That leads to larger change. So I would think about, you know, what are their interests and how can I meld their interests with this learning, you know, and try to find a creative way to put it in front of them and spark that dialogue. There's a lot of research, a lot of books, and a lot of papers that have been written on this issue. The tighter control, the more authoritarian you become in your leadership style, the less creativity exists within the organization, and the less willingness there is to think innovatively or to think in terms of change.
Well, that has been very, very helpful. Thank you.
But again, it's about if you can figure out what makes people tick and how they learn best and where they're most comfortable, and then move the conversation to that spot for them. That usually at least opens up a conversation. Because
No,
I can guarantee you, Bill, that if they're not getting the outcomes or they're not getting the outcomes fast enough, they're just as motivated to figure it out. They just can't get beyond their own sort of blind spot to see it. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. These are great suggestions, and you give me a perfect direction to go in now. Thank you. You solved a big problem for me.
Colin.
Thank you so much for your talk tonight, Dr.
Yeah.
Slaw. It was very informative. My name is Fallon. I'm one of the integrated vascular surgery residents at Mass General. So I think from a trainee perspective, a lot of what you shared is also incredibly eye-opening and valuable. I think, one thing that I think probably comes up for a lot of us who are in residency right now is there's very little formal training that we get, whether it's in medical school or residency, on leadership, but you're put into positions of leadership just by virtue of your where you are in your training. Like you were just like an intern yesterday, and then all of a sudden I'm a third year who's in charge of the intern, right? And so it's a lot of it is just learning on the kind of on the job how to become a leader, which you spoke a little bit about. But I think the other thing I'm always curious about is in that space, especially as residents, when we care and our attendings care about the final product of how everything needs to be done. The ability to be flexible enough to allow your first or second year, like your junior resident, to sort of fail or to do something not well, but then learn how to grow in the process is hard. It's hard to let go because you want. So we kind of talked about micromanaging earlier, but how do you develop that soft skill to allow people to build the confidence as a leaders, to build the confidence to get better at something rather than, over helping and that being sort of a hindrance to their growth in and of itself?
Yeah, I think it is challenging. And so, just like in your clinical training, there were times that safe space had to be created for you to try something that you've never tried before, either through simulators or through cadavers, or they probably didn't let you operate on a person right away, right? You probably had some steps along the way. This is the same. So creating mock opportunities or creating simulations for leadership challenges works just the same, right? And so at your resident meetings, that you have every once in a while or once a month, put a leadership challenge on the table and have everybody sort of role play through it, and walk through it. As I said before, it's very experiential, and if you're at Mass General, you said, I mean, so have Andy or, have one of your leaders join you, to work through a leadership challenge and sort of listen to the process and give feedback. I think that's how it's done. Now, I would also say that we need to do a better job of at least making sure that all trainees are leaving training with a fundamental understanding of this bigger awareness, of yes, it's all about the outcome, but at the end of the day, it's about the person and the family experiencing the outcome also, right? That's important, as well as the system of people that produce the outcome. It's that sort of bigger web of what's going on that is sort of really that recognition from a leadership perspective that will help you grow. It's if you can get alignment of the clinical outcome and the productive social network around producing that outcome, then you've really got something, right? But it requires a greater awareness. It's not all sort of just about the vessel, or the clinical outcome. It's about thinking about the patient, the compliance, how to communicate with that individual so that to make sure that they did receive the message that you intended them to receive, right? It's about giving feedback to others, even under stress, in a positive, productive way, not in a way that destroys confidence, but actually builds confidence, right? These are all things that need to be taught more, that aren't being taught. And I would just say, as I mentioned to Dr. Schutz, that it's in reading and it's in learning and doing. And I would encourage you to, build a leadership challenge situation or a leadership case, into your discussions on a weekly or monthly basis to take people through it. And if you're looking for some good case challenges or you're looking for articles to start the discussion, just let me know. And we've got plenty of those, starter kits. In fact, one of the things that we give out to the LDP, and Betsy, will you remind me of this and I'll send it, but we have an actual toolkit that we built, a leadership toolkit for everyone that goes through the program. It's got 45 different leadership and management tools in there, many of which are perfect for these kinds of brief 15, 20-minute case discussions and sort of challenge events. So I'm happy to send the toolkit to all of you, and you could take a look at it. I guess the other thing is, as I say to everyone that, is willing to endure me for this discussion, is I'm here for you. I'm with you. And so you can always call me. This is a passion of mine. You're a passion of mine. So I think that if there's anything I can do to help, I'm happy to do it. So just call me anytime and we'll figure out how to manage what's going on there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we shared Betsy worked with Tiffany and Jim, and we shared the short version to all the fellows of Pose Kushner. So that was a huge addition to the fellowship, and everybody was excited.
Yeah, in the research that Tiffany was doing, it was very interesting. Not surprising that vascular surgeons were pretty high on challenging the process, right, in their organizations, and a little bit lower on encouraging the heart, right? People always ask me, have I found the same results with different kinds of physicians? And so I can tell you, having done this with pediatricians for 20 years or so, they're almost the complete opposite. So they're very, very high on encouraging the heart, and they're much more conflict averse. And so they're much lower on challenging the process. So there is an element, there's something about vascular surgery that draws you to this field in common, right? You have certain talents, you have certain skill sets in common. And like most things in life, it's the things that you're not good at that you have to exercise in order to be completely full, right? And completely balanced. And so that's the thing, is medical school training has made you, from a leadership perspective, unbalanced in terms of managing a healthcare delivery system that's built on complex human organizations. So you just need to exercise those muscles because you're natural leaders. So we just need to fill out the rest of your muscle development, for leadership, and then put you to work to try to make the changes that need to be made out there in the healthcare system. All right, Betsy, I think I've thoroughly exhausted everybody. So
Not at all. That was excellent. That really, really was, Ken. Thank you so much.
all right.
Adam, do you have any closing remarks?
No, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And this is I like the messaging is fantastic for residents, because I think it can be a daunting task to feel kind of in the middle, but there's so much value in leading from that position. And so this is just an amazingly targeted message that really thank you for coming and giving it to us. And we'll have the recording out, and we'll make sure to share it with everyone if they did miss it tonight. But we thank everyone who's on the call tonight, and thanks Dr. Slaw for joining, and what a fantastic program.
No, my pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in Boston if you're at the VAM. If you see me, come up and say hi, and let's continue the dialogue.
Thank you so much. And like Dr. Slaw and Adam said, we look forward to seeing everyone in Boston. If not, we will see everyone in July. So take care, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.